Hello and welcome to our last session of the day. My name is Adam Parker here with Carnegie. For this final session, we are joined by Jim Fong with the one and only UPCEA. He will be engaging all of us adults in the room and talking us through how to appropriately engage the other adult learners, but do it on their terms. Before we get started, I do want to share a few quick reminders. This session is being recorded, and we will be distributing it after. Additionally, I encourage you to be social. You will notice that there is a chat function as well as a question and answer function on the right-hand side of your screen through the Whova app. I encourage you to use them throughout. We will address as many questions as we can with the time that we have, and we encourage you to meet some of the other participants in the chat. Obviously, our time is limited here, so if you have any questions or comments that arise after the session, please feel free to reach out to Jim or us here at Carnegie, and we'll make sure that we get your questions answered. With that, I'm excited to pass this session over to Jim to dive in.
Thank you very much, Adam. It's my pleasure to be part of this. I was part of it last year, and it was a great time, and met a few people afterwards virtually, and with a few other conversations later on that followed. But it's my pleasure to be here. My name is Jim Fong, and I am the Chief Research Officer at UPCEA. Basically, that means that I'm in charge of looking at trends and getting them out to our members, and also doing some custom research and audience research to help our 400 institutional members. And we also have another 50 corporate members, of which Carnegie is part of that. And so it's my pleasure to be part of this. And also just to kind of talk about the connection a little bit with Carnegie. A number of our members use Carnegie and seem really, really happy about it. So it's our pleasure to be part of this because Carnegie's been part of our programs. It's great to be part of Carnegie's program. So I've been with UPCEA now for about 12 years. And prior to UPCEA, I was at Penn State. I was there for about almost 9 years, and I was the director of research, marketing, research, and planning there, and helped with their World Campus and their online initiative, and help basically modernize their marketing and research functions there, help them implement a more of a modernized CRM, and got the marketing team more actually away from being a heavy design and creative group to more of a digital group. And so that took us quite a while here. And then also to manage the marketing function based on analytics. That was kind of my last thing I did before I moved on, and then eventually jumped into UPCEA. What else do I do besides UPCEA? I also teach part-time at UC Davis. I teach a data visualization course there, and I also developed a market research module for their MOOC program as well. So that's kind of my background here. I actually sit here in State College, Pennsylvania, about 2 miles away from the Penn State campus because, family's here, kids went to school there, wife works there. And so that's where I'm located, just as background. So what am I talking about today? I am talking about engaging the new adult learner. And the adult learner has changed a lot. And we've been doing so much research on the adult learner. And one thing that we did during the pandemic is, we had a research group, and we do program research, and we made a decision at the highest levels, at the executive level, to say that when we come out of the pandemic, we need to make sure that our members have information about themselves, about the adult learner, about employers, and whatsoever. And so we invested, the good last 3 or 4 years just surveying adult learners, doing focus groups with our members, doing a lot of different things. Interviewing, we just surveyed 511 employers a few months ago, and we surveyed 1,500 employers last year to find out what their needs and interests are. But the one thing that we did learn is of over 5,000 adult learners that we've surveyed during that period is they're very, very different. And I'm just going to reflect a little bit about my career. Before Penn State, I was in the little state of Vermont. I was doing part-time teaching at University of Vermont, Community College of Vermont, Trinity College of Vermont, all these places here. And I was teaching evening school. I was teaching weekend school. The adult learner, during the 80s and 90s, tended to be a woman re-entering the workforce. The demographics were out of balance with the workforce. Women were coming back in at a higher pace. In the 90s and in the 2000s here, online learning was starting to take place, and we had folks that were trying to get ahead of the curve and accessing education, and so that was a different demographic. 2008 came, we had We had an economic kind of shifting that happened here due to a recession. We actually had the adult learner very, very different there. They were caught off guard economically, but they were also trying to reskill themselves because what we had is the internet or the cloud generation. Here we are, fast forward 2023, and we're on the beginning of the automation generation, and AI, and ChatGPT, whatever. A lot of self-driving cars. All this stuff is really heading toward an automated economy, and so we have to transform education again. And so the adult learner is not just a single demographic. It is not just a reskilling person that's 45 years old. It's somebody that's very fragmented and segmented. So I wanted to spend the next half an hour, 40 minutes talking about who we've identified as the adult learner. To do so, let's actually do a quick quiz, and you can put this in the chat later on about what you got, how many you've got right. I'm going to give you 5 questions and see how well you might know common facts or pop culture or things about the adult learner. Let me ask you the first question. What percentage of Americans say the quality of online education is the same as or better than in-person education? Is it 25%, 35%, 55%, or 75%? Just write it down or be honest with yourself and just keep track of how many you get. So I'm just going to do a quick count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And let's see whether or not you got it. So it's 55%. And that's a new study that came out actually about a year ago, about 50. And that increased by 7% since the last time the study happened. So the pandemic has created more individuals that believe that online education is the same as or better than in-person education. So it definitely had a positive impact in terms of education. So let's go to the next question. In 2023, and this is about up to a month ago, there's a lot of numbers that were being batted back and forth, especially among our congressional hearings. But the best number that I found, regardless, is from a specific source. But let me ask you the question: in 2023, how many active TikTok users were in the U.S.? Is it 56 million, 67 million, 74 million, or 87 million? And I will tell you, it's not the 110 million that the CEO of TikTok mentioned during the congressional hearings that were about 7 months ago. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Answer is 87 million. So that number here is based on a number of internet sources that are tracking traffic across the internet in terms of downloads and access to TikTok. So that number is probably a closer number than the 110 million. Okay, next question here. So if you got 2 out of 2, that's great. So you're in touch with the world. Let's actually talk about adults here using CBD. So in terms of a CBD product, what percentage of American adults have used CBD once or more in the past 10 years? And is it 15%, 25%, 33%, or 45%? And present company excluded. I'm just kidding around. So let's actually take a guess on this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The answer is 33%. Okay, got 2 more questions left for you. And if you're 3 for 3, you're well informed of things around you. How much more in gross revenues did Taylor Swift make in concert revenue in 2023 than Bruce Springsteen? Was it 2 times, 6 times, 10 times, or infinity because she's great? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number is 6 times. She made 6 times the amount than Bruce Springsteen made in 2023, and largest revenues of any performer there. Okay, so if you're 4 for 4, we have our last question. What percentage of U.S. households now own a pet? And you can see a picture of me. Yes, those are my dogs, and my kids made fun of me, and they made me a grandma shirt with the dogs' names on it, Lucy and Finn. And usually I put up their Instagram accounts so you can follow them, just because it's the thing to do now. It's very millennial Gen Z. So is it 25%, 33%, 50%, or 67%? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is 67%. And the interesting thing about it here it was actually 72% during the pandemic because people tried to get pets during the pandemic and couldn't. And they returned either pets have passed away, or they return their pets back, sadly, to the shelter or to an agency. And so now it's down to 67% here. But that was a pretty big jump from pre-pandemic levels, because before the pandemic it was 54%. So it was a pretty big jump. So those are just some fun facts here. So if you actually got 5 out of 5 here, put it in the chat and brag a little bit. Say you got it. Say you're up on common facts or the quick quiz there. So please feel free to boast a little bit. So let's actually get into it. Now that we kind of set the stage, now that the world is changing, the world is very different. Micro mobility is different. Food is different. The way millennials eat food is very different, and they shop for it. The whole shopping behavior is very, very different here, that it's reshaped the adult learner. But ironically, higher education really hasn't changed that much. And so I really feel like we've got to evolve our higher education systems pretty significantly to adapt for this very strange and non-predictable adult. These adults right now are, on average, actually the adult learner on average, depending on who you talk to, is either 28 years old or 32 years old. But regardless, that's either close to Gen Z, or it's a kind of younger or middle-aged millennial. But they're very, very different, and they're very complicated. And I don't think we in higher education give them enough credit. So let's quickly paint the higher education landscape. So one of the interesting things here is that we have a perception issue with higher education. We have a problem right now with higher education. There's a lot of not favorable media out there, a lot of research out there that suggests that in addition to a demographic cliff, the value of education is suffering. And 6 in 10 Americans surveyed recently said that college is worth the time and the money. More than four in 10 bachelor's degree holders under 45 did not agree that the benefits of education exceeded the cost. Well, we also have political issues around education as well. That is higher education too woke at all? Is higher education too liberal at all? I mean, all these things are playing against education. We do have some really great things happening in Texas here, where higher education is shifting a little bit, where it's not so degree dependent, but it's very stackable. It's micro credentials that are happening here. So even though there's a lot of poking at the degree right now, there's also new developments that are happening as a result of these shifting demographics and the need for a stronger workforce. So we've got a lot of things that are happening within higher education. But high schoolers, they also don't, some high schoolers, and it's a slightly lower percentage than years past here, also don't believe that college is worth it. And we're starting to hear it from a lot of companies as well. Google's saying it, and Starbucks is saying it, and whatsoever. So there's a lot of and they're not saying that education and higher education is not valued. They're possibly saying that everything doesn't fit into a degree. So one of the things that's been happening over the last 20 years here is that high school graduation has been increasing. So we have more people coming into the funnel. Anywhere between 3.5, 3.8, 3.7 million folks ready for college here. But on the other hand, we're not seeing it in higher education. We're seeing declining enrollments. That kind of tells me that higher education is a little broken, at least just by offering just degrees. Higher education's been a little bit, I don't know, what's the word? They've been a little bit inflexible in terms of going with anything that's not a degree. And I think this is starting to show it. I think we're losing a little bit of graduates, a little bit of students every year as a result. In 2010, we had 18.1 million undergraduate students and 2.9 million graduate students. That's 21 million students enrolled in higher education. Higher education works really well in its current model with about 20 million. However, today we're down to 18.2 million. We have 15.1 million. We've lost 3 million undergraduate students, since 2010. Graduate students have kind of hovered around 3.1 million. So, and then there's some research out there by Encora, EduVentures, that says that the graduate student market is not likely to grow very much. It will kind of hover around 3 million more or less. So what we've got here is we've got a problem in higher education. And I think this is a shift in demographics that we need to acknowledge. We need to acknowledge there that this next generation of learners, 18 to 22-year-olds, or Gen Zers that are older, or millennials, don't necessarily want a full degree. or they can realizing that their ROI might be different if they actually went with something else. Another thing that's happening here is that some of the mega universities have really gobbled up an inordinate share of the market. And what they're really doing here, Southern New Hampshire pre and post pandemic or mid pandemic, they picked up a few thousand more students, as did Western Governors. There's also a study that's out there. Actually, there's an article by Inside Higher Education that shows that Southern New Hampshire, Western Governors, and the University of Maryland Global combined picked up 10,000 more 18 to 22-year-olds that are enrolled in fully online programs now. So there's a lot of shifting that's happening. So not only does this new adult learner, a percentage is leaving that campus-based kind of scenario here for now a fully online program here. But this is something that's evolving, and it's something that we have to acknowledge that our product has got to change. The adult learner is changing. Our product has got to change accordingly, and as has our communication. So just to note that we're tracking a number of these things. 18 to 22-year-olds are going to fully online. They're not coming in huge numbers, but the percentages are starting to double in a few areas here. I was at a UPCEA conference where Oregon State and University of Washington reported that the number of applicants that were 18 to 22 years old had doubled basically since pre-pandemic levels regarding fully online programs. So this is happening. I don't think it's going to, take huge chunks away from that campus-based students, but we've got to acknowledge that, even if it's under 1% right now, it could go to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5%. These are all things that we've got to look at as we look at the new adult learner. But we also have many other adult learners. Higher education has been focused in on 15.1 million students who provide a high return on investment. What we actually have here is we have 240 million plus students that are not these students here that we can market to. So the adult learner, especially in a transformational economy, has the potential to reach new audiences here. There's no reason why we shouldn't go after a high school degree GED holder. There's no reason why we shouldn't go after somebody with no high school degree and give them a micro-credential based education or a stackable credit education that could lead to a degree. There's some college no degree. That went from 38 million before the pandemic to 40.4 million. I'm sorry, 37 million before the pandemic to 40.4 million post-pandemic. So we have a lot of people with some college no degree. So we have all these different audiences here that are really segmenting and fragmenting the new adult learner. But the good news here is that we're seeing more support. This is a study that Modern Campus did, that the institutions are acknowledging the fact that the demographic cliff is happening, and they've got to do things differently. So the professional continuing online unit is getting more support and more resources to bring in that external revenue, to bring back those some college no degree students, to go after their alumni better, with non-credit education or credit education that could stack toward a master's degree. All these things are being looked at as alternative forms of revenue for institutions of higher ed. So one of the things that we like to say at UPCEA here is that, this is a potentially optimal model here. And things that you've learned through a badging program or a MOOC or a boot camp should be able to eventually migrate to a credit option here. There's a lot of things that are holding it back. The accreditors are holding that back. Faculty are holding that back. But the accreditors are coming along and faculty are coming along. We're hearing more positive conversations. Accreditors are coming to more of the meetings on micro-credentials. And so these things we're getting more play on, that maybe a stackable model is more in the future. We certainly know that business and industry wants a stackable model. We surveyed a number of them. This study by Wiley shows that there's greater interest from adult learners and businesses that for a more stackable model. We just did a study with Collegius, 511 businesses that we surveyed here. 80% of employers want a stackable model. They said that they would increase their organization's interest in working with colleges and universities if they had more stackability, because they look at the adult learner as, okay, this is a way I can retain them as employees. It's a job retention strategy. So these are all things that that are impacting higher education and the adult learner. And the adult learner is very different. So let me actually just give you a quick snapshot. I'm just trying to manage my time. I'm about halfway through. Let me just quickly look at some of the snapshots at generation and the adult learner. I'm just going to quickly kind of point out, this was done in 2022, this slide here. But the workforce at the time, Gen Z, was about 13%. It's actually closer to 19% now of the workforce is from Gen Z. We've got about 44% millennial driven, 19% or 20% Gen X driven, and 23% baby boomers. That's actually down closer to just over 20% of the workforce is baby boomer. So baby boomers have kind of lost their full power in the marketplace. That market had all the power and had all the authority 5 years ago, and now millennials have kind of gradually taken that over. In fact, if you think about it, most decision makers, a lot of the research we're doing is showing that millennials are making the bulk or the majority of day-to-day training and education decisions here. They might not be making them all. Gen X a lot of them are in the C-suite right now. They're making higher level decisions, but millennials are in control and they have different perceptions toward education. So the adult learner, if the adult learner is 27 or 28, they are a Gen Zer. They're what they call a zillennial. Right now, the bulk of the majority of your adult learners will be Gen Z or millennials. You'll get some Gen Xers. I'm a Gen Xer, but you're going to get fewer and fewer of them in terms of your enrollments within your portfolio. Gen Zers are very, very different from Gen Z in general and millennials in general. So they kind of sit as what we call a boundary spanner. So, but they're very, very different. And I kind of want to point out a few of them, some of the differences there. Their online news, they game a little heavier. They make purchases inside of a store at a higher rate. However, Gen Z actually will use web services more often, delivery services more often as well. And so we're starting to see this mobile generation, and we're starting to see more of a generation that's going to be more automated based. And so you can also see in this chart here, and if you can't see the chart, I apologize, I'll make them available for you, but making online payments using voice activated technologies. Gen Z is 57% compared to 44% of zillennials. We're getting more and more comfortable with our phones and with our apps. Gen Z was the first generation that was really the digital natives of the world. They had their phones all connected to them since they were 8 and 10 years old. And so this is something where they're making greater decisions, and they're faster, and they access information better, and they research and compare products at a faster rate than other generations. And that's why higher education needs to be real careful. They're very conscious about how they shop for food and looking at the ingredients. The same analogy could be used with higher education. What are the ingredients going into a degree? So all these factors are playing in to who the adult learner is. They're very, very savvy consumers here. That you may think that they're looking at their phone and not paying attention to you, but they're consuming information at a very, very fast rate. So another thing that we got to kind of keep in mind here is they're living at home. So half of adults 18 to 24 years old live at home with their parents. And you may think that they're lazy, but that's not the reason here. I think that they're more economically strapped, and they're savvy as well. I think a Gen Zer looks at their savings very differently. They say, hey, why would I want to pay $2,000 a month to live in San Francisco in a 10 by 10 little apartment when I can live with my parents and not pay, and just pay a fraction of that amount, if at all. They're very smart. They're very savvy. They're one of the best generation with money. And it's because they've been forced to, and they have access to information, and they have access to their phones. And so this is something where let's not misinterpret that they're squatters living in a house for no reason at all, or because they're lazy. No, it's because they're very savvy and they're very value conscious. And I think that plays in with higher education. They're very value conscious with higher education. And so if you also think about it, as I mentioned earlier, they shop for food like they do higher education. They look at what ingredients go into their product there. And so if they see a bad product, a bad ingredient going into the product, they're not going to buy it. And they question that with education. I've had done multiple interviews with adult learners, and they actually say, hey, I don't need this class. I don't want, how's this class not going to help me out? Well, how's this class going to help me out? And they question that. And it's because they don't want to waste time. They're very efficient people. And so if you draw the analogy with food, Gen Z shops for food this way, shops for education in a very similar way. I don't mean to diminish the value of education, but it's just in their mindset and their behavior. They're very complicated, very savvy individuals. So they also are influenced well. This, the 2022 study, if we looked at whether or not this organization did it in 2023 around social media, I think we'll see TikTok moving ahead. What this generation is also heavily reliant on is they search for multiple pieces of information. When they look at your schools, they'll look at student reviews, they'll look at college rankings, they'll look at net price calculators. They like these things. They'll actually contact you to find out what percentage of their credits will transfer and whether or not you have a transfer calculator or not. This new adult learner is so savvy, and they pull in information from multiple sources. Yeah, some would argue that they eventually land at the information they want to hear anyway, but they will engage multiple sources for information. And then, as you can see with social media, Instagram's the highest, but TikTok has been growing like crazy here, regardless of whether or not your state has a ban on TikTok or not. I was in the state of Indiana at an institution and was surprised that I met one of the greatest marketing teams that I feel in online education, but at the same point here is they couldn't use TikTok because the state of Indiana would ban it on their servers and whatever. And so I think this is something that's evolving. And in fact, more and more institutions and states that permit it are using TikTok very heavily. I loaded up TikTok, just this morning and saw Susquehanna University in Pennsylvania was hitting me with ads with it. Liberty University is very, very aggressive in the use of TikTok, despite the fact that the conservative leanings of the world of the U.S. are anti-TikTok. And so it's kind of interesting that you've got a very conservative organization promoting very, very heavily using TikTok. So anyway, so this Gen Zer or this young adult learner uses social media and a variety of sources in a particular way. So UPCEA research, again, this is based on almost 5,000 interviews that we did during 2021 and 2022. We did a number of studies for a number of these sponsors here, ranging from Anthology, Blackboard, Thinking Cap, and Ad Agency, Straighterline, and Salesforce. And what we ultimately do is we did all these studies and we put them all together. And then we started running our stats here, and we had 6 clear segments for us to analyze there. And basically, they kind of fell into Gen Z, young millennials, middle millennials, older millennials, and Gen Xers, and they came across based on gender as well. Yes, we did ask a wide range of gender classifications here, but based on sample sizes, they kind of fell into this, and I would just acknowledge that with methodology that this came on to larger sample sizes played a little bit more of an influence in designing our segments. But it's not totally exclusive of some of our other findings as well. And plus, we also did research with those over 45 as well, and did not find as many distinct clustering or correlations that we saw down the line. So this is the 6 adult learner segments that we ended up with, and we just decided to name them. And we added the sizes of them in the US, and this is pretty much what we came out with. They differ pretty significantly. Valentina and Amir, who are our younger millennials, Gen Zers here, they've got some certain impressions. They're a little bit more cost sensitive, and it's a function of demographics and disposable income. Obviously, Jennifer and David, they might be a little bit more better off economically, although Jennifer is still trying to get her degree. Jennifer's got a lot of credits. She doesn't look at stackability as much as the others do because she's kind of committed to her degree, and she's 90 or 100 credits toward her degree there. So she's puts a different value on stackability. On the other hand, Michael and Elise and even though David was a little bit harder to get at here, his willingness to come back to higher education is a little bit less than the other 5 segments, but they prefer stackability. and also with Valentina and Michael here, there's a certain impression here that colleges and universities can't keep up with the economy. So they have some belief there. So there's some correlation with that they believe that stackable credentials or shorter credentials may play a bigger role here. So these 6 segments were very, very interesting in terms of what we learned about them later on. And this study, we actually did this analysis in 2021, beginning of 2022, when we collapsed a lot of the data here. We asked a question about, and this study wasn't on the full 5,000, it was about 2,000 that we asked this question of. But when we collapsed them into their categories here, we asked what are trusted media sources when considering continuing education or training programs. And you can see where the trust came up is university websites and YouTube and Instagram, less so on TikTok, but TikTok was just on early stages there. If you were to repeat this study, I think TikTok would move over, as in a few other things would move over the other way, the other direction here. Some of the research that I've also seen lately has been that even though Twitter has been rebranded as X, there's been an abandonment in terms of a number of demographics that use Twitter now, so the demographics there have even shifted. So social media continues to change here, but our university websites are still the most valued sources here. So my team at UPCEA, we actually scrape and we look at and we engage our member websites. We actually did 100 kind of audits of our member websites. We've also filled out hundreds of requests for information forms. We've looked at their SEO. And so we went into partnership with a company called Search Influence, and we actually came up with an SEO score. And of our members here, the 100 that we sampled here, and a week doesn't go by where I'm not deep diving into a member website here. And I would this score isn't bad on purpose. It's bad because it's real. And what I've seen here is I've seen a lot of creative, beautiful websites that fail on the SEO side. And that they also fail on the RFI side, request for information side, and they fail on navigation as well. And so there's a number of websites in that 7% on the lower end just haven't really updated their websites. They're still dealing with Web 1.0 kind of things or Web 2.0 technologies, and it's very, very bad. And so what we're seeing here is that we have a very complicated Gen Zer, young millennial, middle-aged millennial, yet we're putting them through what looks to be pretty websites more and more or less, but we're putting them through kind of bad processes, and that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing in a lot of our research. As I mentioned here, and one of the things that we do is we do requests for information, and we do it. This is just results from 2020, 2021, and just some examples. In 2021 here, we made 1,000 inquiries into 100 of our members here, and we only got 58% of our inquiries responded back to, and on average it came back to us at 11 hours and 47 minutes. A month doesn't go by where we don't do an enrollment review for an institution, and we get differing results. But I'm going to say that 58% is probably improved now. It's probably closer to like 75% because we created a lot of mayhem and chaos within our UPCEA community when we did this, because all of a sudden people started looking at their CRMs and their enrollment management processes to make sure that they were not negligent. And so I think that within our own community, we've changed a lot. We came across so many bad requests for information forms. We came across one institution, a fairly well-known institution, I'd call them, kind of put them in the elite private category, offering a number of degrees online. And they had a 22 field form with all the elements were required. And so when we did this RFI analysis, we were shocked that we had to put in 22 required fields in here before we could actually get information. And so that disrupted a lot of our community. So our community got better. Is it perfect? No. We still have a lot of folks that are really struggling here by asking too many questions. You cannot ask a Gen Z or new adult learner to fill out a form that has more than 7 fields in it. In fact, really, you should only be asking them 3 or 4 questions there. what's their name, first and last name, what's their email address, how they hear about you, and what program are you interested in. So that's probably the bulk of what you can ask them. If you get a response back to them, then you can ask them those other questions as you build a relationship. But you cannot get a Gen Zer to fill out 22 questions. So these are some things that we've got to acknowledge as we work with our new adult learner populations. This is an enrollment pipeline that we did in 2018, and then the pandemic happened where we were doing another one. But we're releasing I apologize for the shameless plug here for UPCEA, but we have a marketing conference in December in Portland, Oregon, where we're going to release the updated enrollment funnel. And this enrollment funnel, I'm just going to give you one or two metrics here. That these were preliminary data here. Now we've since collected, these numbers may have changed here, but we knew that it took about 159 days from a credit perspective. And when you got an inquiry to somebody that actually matriculated in the program, it's 7.3%. So that number has changed, and we actually tracked it for non-credit and credit this time. And so that's going to be and it's a pretty significant difference here. So we're going to release those results in December. But stealth applications, 28% of applications that came in were stealth. When I looked at the study, I think it was 3/4 of the way down, that number was up to 43%. So it's an interesting thing that's evolved here regarding our enrollment pipeline. Some people want stealth applications. It's part of their strategy. It's like, give them as much information as they can and then get them to apply. That way we don't have to spend money on humans and sending them stuff and whatsoever. If we do it right, then stealth applications are great. But for the most part, stealth applications aren't necessarily the best thing. So let me start wrapping up things here. In addition to food, I want you to be thinking about the adult learner as the way they date. And usually when they date, they go onto Bumble or Tinder or wherever, and they'll put out their profile. So an adult learner will put out their request for information here, and they'll go to 10 institutions here. An adult learner will look at, okay, well, I put my profile out there. I have 10 people I might be interested in. Let's see what actually happens. And so they wait and see what happens here, and they see, okay, what institution is going to ask me creepy questions, or on Bumble or Tinder, who's going to ask the creepy question? Let me eliminate a few of them because they're weird, or they put something in their profile that's weird, but I don't like them. Higher education can have, a lot of that's the same thing. Is like, do we make them fill out that 22 field form there? Do we ask them questions about their employer too early? I came across a form earlier this week where and this is an elite institution in the East, where when I got to their request for information form, they asked me my employer information. They also asked me when I was going to take this program that I'm showing interest in. Some forms I also have to fill out, not this one in particular, but they'll ask me my ethnicity right off. I know why. It's because they're checking off a box at their institution. Those questions are creepy. And if you ask too many creepy questions, adult learners are going to disengage with you. They're going to say, hey, in fact, I spoke at one of our UPCEA conferences where somebody filled out a form, and this is 9:30 at night on a Friday night. They filled out a form and they got a call 15 minutes later. And this person said, I do not want to take that call now. That's creepy in my mind. I'd rather see an email first or something else there, but there's some legacy thinking that happens, or legacy planning that's happening with some enrollment management systems here. Ultimately, if you manage the relationship correctly, and Gen Z wants you to manage the relationship correctly, you don't want to chase Gen Z away. Gen Z is already skittish. We know that Gen Z, is more prone to mental health issues here. Do not creep them out. So ultimately, if you do things right, you get a match. And so that's where I want to encourage you on is Gen Z is smart. They gather information correctly. They get creeped out. And they're very, very different. And you've got to plan your systems and your processes around them in order to get that match. And I think that there's a number of institutions out there that are doing some really great, wonderful things. But there's a lot of institutions that are asking questions way too creepily, if that's a word, or they're actually pushing the wrong information at the wrong time, or they're sending multiple emails, or they're getting an RFI form and then they're responding back 3 days later. and that's the adult learners already started shopping again. So that's where I want to leave you in terms of thoughts around who the adult learner is and how you might think about them and how you might manage them differently. Because quite frankly, I think there's a lot of opportunity. Yes, there's a demographic cliff out there, but there's 240 million other adults that we can tap into with a better product, and if we communicate with them in a more correct fashion. So I know we have about 15, 20 minutes left for questions here. So let me kind of end it in terms of my presentation here. There's my contact information, but I think we're gonna have a Q&A right now, aren't we?
We do. Jim, sincerely appreciate that in-depth expertise there, dropping all that knowledge. We do have a few questions. I'm going to start here. You said calling too quickly is creepy, but that calling 3 days after an RFI is bad. So when do you think an appropriate time to reach out could be?
I think it's more about your strategy and who your adult learner is. And so I think that, sometimes it's your program too. Let me just draw some analogies real quickly. If you have an engineer who's got a bachelor's degree in civil engineering and they fill out a form, do you think that that engineer wants a call back right away? I don't think he or she does. On the other hand, if I'm in sales and I want to get an MBA and I fill out that form, and do I want that call? I might be more willing to take that call. I think you've got to look at your demographics, and you've got to look at what your personas are at, and you've got to design your personas and your response based on who your adult learner is. It isn't a cookie cutter response. I will tell you that one of the mega universities, one of the top 5 enrolling universities, I filled out their form, and I purposely did not. They called me within an hour, and I purposely did not respond to that call. For the next 31 days, I got on average 3 calls a day from them. A Gen Zer does not want that. That creeps Gen Z out. So I think it's a deeper question that you've got to look at your segments of learners, and can you actually move them through your CRM system so that person gets a call. That person look after the online MBA and sales technology, they get the call. But maybe the data analytics person or the engineering person, gets an email first, or gets a text, or something happens. But I don't think they need to be called right away. Or maybe they're called the next day. But 15 minutes on a Friday night to a young woman, adult learner that I talk to is probably not what you want to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. Timing
Yeah.
in everything we do is so important.
And the same goes. Before you get there, the same thing goes with texting as well. They may have given you their cell phone number, but you've also got to think about what's an appropriate time when you're going to use that secret weapon of texting. Yes, you might want to call, at some point, but when does that texting happen? This institution that bombarded me with average of 3 calls a day for 31 days started texting me at around day 25. And then they started texting me pretty heavily, and then it stopped. So.
Perfect. I think towards the middle of the session, you were kind of recommending TikTok, or I know one of your questions that you answered at the beginning of the session was 87 million Americans are on TikTok. So one of our attendees has questions about TikTok. Essentially, how do they use TikTok to market to adult learners? And is there data to suggest that paid TikTok advertisement is effective, or organic content is the better route with this population?
It's such a new platform and technology right now that and there's 2 ways to do it. Obviously, if you can get influencers, if you're strong, if you've developed a program, and higher education is behind there, and it'll take a while to get some best practice institutions out there to be able to leverage the influencer population here. But it's something that's eventually going to happen. If you can get people to use your products, if you can get alumni to talk about your products, their degrees, then I think you start going to that influencer kind of mentality here. And that's the more organic way to do things. And it's more believable. People like that. On the other hand, the sponsored ads or the paid ads through TikTok here, I have not, we actually have a TikTok person coming to our conference in Portland coming up, and I'm eager to learn a little bit more here. But there's only been a handful of institutions within our UPCEA community that are using TikTok, and I have not seen any data yet to see what their ROI is. But we're just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of how to do it right, and whether or not they're getting a positive return on investment. So I don't really have a good I don't have a good recommendation for you, except for that you just can't ignore it. You've got to socialize it within your school. It's not a bad thing. I think what's actually happening out here is that it's been politicized, but it's been a powerful tool that we just can't ignore. We have to start investing into it. We have to start learning more about it. And if we have the ability, we have to start piloting things on it, because it's probably the strongest platform right now for that demographic of young adult learners. And we're trying to skirt our way right now with Instagram Reels, paid Google ads, some Facebook ads, and it's hard right now. I mean, if there's any mass media where they're concentrated, it's kind of TikTok right now, but it's such a new thing for us.
Jim, I've sincerely appreciated this. I think this session was so appropriate because we are all adult learners, and we're trying new channels, we're trying new techniques, and really appreciate all the information and data that you did share. As we depart today, since there weren't any more questions that came in at this time, if you want to connect with Jim afterwards, his contact information is directly on the screen, and we can pass along any content afterward. Jim, are there any parting words or comments that you want to share with our audience?
No, I think just be willing to try new things and challenge yourself, because what I see, there are a lot of legacy marketing behaviors that are out there. This whole calling thing happens because there's an urban legend out there that if they filled out a form, you have a high percentage of catching them at their desk. And I don't know where that came from, but I think it's about 20 years old right now. And so I just think that you've got to challenge yourself at the relationship more than anything. You've also got to budget for marketing. You've got to think more strategically about marketing. You've also got to look at the corporate side of marketing. There's a lot of things that marketing is not the same as what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's very, very different post-pandemic. And the adult learner, who we don't give enough credit to, is very, very different and very, very powerful. I mean, the way they set up their social circles right now is pretty incredible right now. And so I think that now is a time where if you've been doing things the same way for 5 years, it's probably, I would question that maybe a lot of it might be wrong. You got to make sure you modernize it, and make sure that your partners are modernizing it.
Yeah, no more rinse and repeat. I sincerely agree with that, Jim. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for connecting with us today during day 2 of the Connection Conference. Don't forget to come back tomorrow as we start at 10 a.m. and we look to create more meaningful connections with another very important population, transfer students. So come back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Tag, comment, and share with us at Carnegie HQ across all social channels. Thank you all again for joining, and enjoy the rest of your evening.